we've got Bill Brinnier. He was the best friend of Frank DeMartini. And Frank DeMartini is actually featured in our film Loose Change Final Cut as the engineer that talks about the fact that the World Trade Center could take multiple jumbo jet airliner hits, and it would be like a pencil poking through a screen door. Let's give it up for Bill Brinnier. Thank you, sir.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for that introduction. It goes without saying that I'm not here to honor me. I'm here to honor my best friend, a fellow I met back in 1971 when he was 18 years old and I was 20. We were students at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York, in the School of Architecture. And at the same time, I was also a member of the United States military in the Army Reserves that I had joined in order not to have to go to Vietnam. And I was an active member of the anti-war efforts to stop the war in Vietnam. Frank helped me and to participate in many anti-war events, one of which was here in Washington. In May of 1971, on May Day, we decided if the government wouldn't shut down the war, we would shut down the government. So we came down and there was an encampment, and long story short, I was arrested, but I did make it back to New York. So fast forward to 1993, when the infamous bombing, the first bombing of the World Trade Center took place. Frank and I had both completed our education, had done our service under the guise of licensed architects, had sat for the exam, and we were now licensed architects out on our own. He kind of jumped the fence. He wanted to jump the fence. I had jumped the fence. And he found a little ad in the New York Times for an architect member of the damage assessment team at the World Trade Center. It was placed by Leslie E. Robertson, who was had the contract with the Port Authority for the maintenance of the structure at the World Trade Center. And Frank interviewed for the job and took the job as a temporary 6-month assignment. And he got his wife, Nicole, a job there as well. And as time went on, he made an impression on the Port Authority. They're not quick to hire, but they hired Frank as the manager of construction for the World Trade Center. So he suddenly had the entire World Trade Center, all 7 buildings were under his guise in terms of any construction project. So it's a little weird that he was not aware that the buildings were being loaded with explosives. This is, what I think of today is why didn't Frank know? This picture was taken on August the 11th, 1995, when there was a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II. And there was a flyby of all World War II aircraft up and down the Hudson River. And Frank was instrumental in getting my brother and I, treating us to an afternoon on the roof of the World Trade Center of the North Tower, which nobody gets to go to. The observation deck was on the South Tower. And we were up there with I think it was a 65 millimeter lens taking pictures of these airplanes. So I want to honor Frank in that the day that it happened, I was on my way to work, and I came around the corner in New Jersey on the Jersey Turnpike and looked across, and the North Tower looked like a chimney. All this black smoke was rising out of it. And I was in panic. And I had my little cell phone. I called Frank, no answer. I called his wife, no answer. I knew she had just gotten back from visiting her family in Switzerland. And Frank was eager to have her back. It turns out Frank and Nicole she still worked for Leslie E. Robertson with Lyra on the 35th floor of the South Tower, and his office was on the 88th floor of the North Tower. He had a beautiful office with 3 beautiful windows that looked out on the Statue of Liberty. She was just getting up to travel down the elevators, across the plaza and up the elevators of the South Tower to her job when the first plane hit, struck the North Tower. And she said, Bill, the building, it went whoomp, 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 whoomp. All the ceiling tiles fell out. All the sprinklers went off. Smoke started to fill the floor. It was bedlam. The department that he ran occupied the entire floor, so they quickly got everybody in the conference room. There was one conference room in the corner that didn't have any smoke, and Frank and a buddy of his went and scouted out the 3 stairwells, found out that stairwell C was clear, and they directed everybody down. His wife led the crowd, screaming at the top of her lungs to Frank to please follow, because she knew that he was going to go up, which he did. He got 12 people off the 89th floor. They continued up and made it to the 90th floor. They had to break in with crowbars. They had to break through the sheetrock. The doors were just jammed shut because it was 1 floor below the actual impact zone. And they got 6 people off of the 90th floor. Those 6 people were Germans, just like Jeff Campbell's brother, Matt. There were other national people, people from other countries were in the building, and we didn't find out about them until several years later. There was an article in Der Stern, the German news magazine, about these 6 people who recanted their story of being saved by Frank DeMartini. It's always tough for me to talk about Frank, but we don't know where he was when the North Tower came down. We think he was somewhere between the 25th and the 15th floor. And at that point, if you've all looked at these movies, these videos that we're talking about or showing about the incredible explosive power of those buildings blowing up, he was vaporized. That was the saving grace. He didn't, I don't think he felt a thing. So I'd like to, this is Frank sitting at his desk in the World Trade Center. You can see the magnificent view he had behind him. And just before, in January of 2001, he convinced a gal at the History Channel that they should do a special on the history of the World Trade Center. This was going to be Frank's moment in the sun, his 15 minutes or seconds of fame. And it took him, they actually did it, they got it produced, and it was supposed to air in June of 2001. And something came up, they didn't air it. It was supposed to they'd go off again in August of 2001. It didn't air, something came up. Well, then 9/11 happened, and in October of 2001, this aired. So, I agree with him on the strength of the building was phenomenal. That's what we learned in school when we studied structures, the strength of steel. I mean, I could go on for days. There's been a lot of talk about, what actually happened and how it was brought down. But suffice it to say that a building that was built to withstand a hurricane wind force of 140 miles an hour, that is a force that is far beyond any jet, no matter how big it is, hitting the side of the building. These buildings were incredibly robust, and it was physically impossible for a mere jet crashing into it to bring it down. It was built to withstand that kind of load. The title of my talk here is what searching for 9/11 truth means to me. What is it? What does it mean to all of us? We all have a stake in this. It's been said over and over tonight, or last night and tonight, that the overall effect of 9/11 is still with us today. You know, we live in a war economy. And it's been admitted by President Bush when he was in the White House that you know, the United States couldn't exist without its war economy. It's endemic. It's all inclusive. It's such that if we don't do something about it, it's going to consume us. I search for I search for answers. When it first came down, when I saw it on a TV screen, the building coming down, I said, that's impossible. Can't happen. You know, so they did get me for a while. You know, I kind of calmed down. I said, okay, maybe. But within 2 years, I was like, no, this isn't true. There has to be something. So I started looking online. The internet was not as robust as it is today, so it took some doing. But I eventually found the website of Richard Gage, and I was one of the early signers. And I told Richard that you know, I was friends with Frank, and I gave him my story, and he said, "Ooh, I got to talk to you." So we did get together, and so I've had a relationship with Richard for years. You know, I met Ted Walter as well at about the same time, and we've had a continuous relationship. But I have been so thirsty. You know, have been searching and searching. You know, Aaron Good, when he spoke last night, that's the kind of search, and that's the kind of in-depth analysis of world events and what makes this world tick that intrigues me. That's what I'm hungry for. And I'm trying to find peace. You know, I feel like that I'm a loyal and patriotic American. You know, I did everything by the book. I was a Boy Scout. I was a acolyte in church. You know, I did everything. And I still have that feeling, you know, that this country belongs to all of us, not just the people at the top, not just the people that perpetrated the events of 9/11, and that put that to a use to get the country's blood up and get us engaged in war, and it worked like a charm, you know. As for all the sadness that it brings me, what they did, I'm so curious to find out how they did it. You know, how did they pull this off? It was an incredible thing. It was impossible that it could have been done by a scrappy band of Al-Qaeda, you know, terrorists, you know, holed up in a cave in Afghanistan. This was something that cost probably billions of dollars to pull off, and it took years, if not decades, to pull it off. You know, this is something that's deep-seated. I'm sure it was compartmentalized, just like the Manhattan Project that built the atomic bomb. So there's no question that, in my mind, that something like that was going on. I find peace. I find peace, inner peace, in understanding how the world ticks and knowing what's going on around me. I choose to stick my head in the sand. You know, I open up my mind, and this crowd, this movement, this is me. This is what I'm all about. This is what makes me tick. It makes me want to get up in the morning and find out more and discover as much as I can. Thank you.